Let's get ready to mumble, which is how I feel every podcast should be introduced. We're going to talk gold, which had an interesting end of the week. We'll talk Bitcoin, which had an interesting week. The major U.S. indices hitting all-time highs, everything but the NASDAQ. Everything is mostly awesome because we finally got our stimulus. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge, and this is episode 108 of Bizarro World. How are you, Nick?
I am at the mercy of some construction in a historic building, and so I apologize in advance for any gyrations and or vibrations. I'm doing good. How are you?
Gyrations, vibrations, stimulus. I am well. No complaints on my end. Are you Beeple?
Aren't we all?
Did you hear about the digital restaurant sales?
I read about it in an editorial this week that I believe you wrote.
I wrote about Beeple. I didn't write about the digital restaurant sales, though. Let's get right into Beeple. Look, I joked about the stimulus being here finally, right? What a relief. The stimulus is here. The markets clearly love it. Everything but the NASDAQ. The tech companies don't like the rising real rate environment. That will reverse, of course, sooner or later. And, you know, I'm gonna continue to go out on a limb despite brand new record highs every day and say that's going to continue for the next couple of years until we have a serious dislocation in the market. I don't think that ends anytime soon. And man, I got to tell you, this Beeple thing, for those of you not familiar, somebody paid $69 million for a digital piece of art, an NFT, which is a non-fungible token, which Mr. Hodge has been telling you about for months. And so there's a gentleman who goes by the name of Beeple. And in 2007, he decided he was going to go ahead and produce a digital piece of art every single day, right? And so he did this for 5 years. This year, recently, 2 months ago, he decides he's going to put all of these works of digital art, JPEGs, into a compilation, which is a big, giant JPEG with mini screenshots of each one of those 5,000 days and the individual pieces of art. That JPEG, which is what I'm calling it, sold for $69 million. It was called Every Days. When he got news of the sale, he tweeted, "Holy fuck," and that was it. His real name is Mike Winkleman. Mike, congrats, a cheers, a salute to you, sir. A heck of an art project, huh, Nick?
What's with it with the Winkles and the crypto? It's the Winklevi on steroids. Incredible, right? And just shows you the things that are attracting value. And as we were speaking about in the last podcast, owning like the ephemeral nature of the internet, right? Because it's just, the development of a fad. Someone was writing about it as Beanie Babies today, for example. But the sums are absolutely no joke. And it speaks to the decentralization, the anti-institutional nature of where people want to put their dollars and where they want to diversify their dollars away from. And the world is growing, or has grown, more complex seemingly than our ability to understand it, because it's tough to wrap your head around some of this stuff. But we'll see how long the NFT train runs. And I'm interested to see or learn more about your call for continued highs. I agree that there's a lot of money in the system and there's a lot more a runway for stocks to go higher. I'm interested to see if they can continue to go up at the pace that they've been going up. So that's something to watch. But yeah, everything's seemingly awesome, right?
Everything is awesome. You now can. This is what I thought for a quick second. I always joke, but it's true that I'm a relatively simple guy with simple wants and needs and a simple outlook and approach to life, right? And so I read an article or I read a headline earlier this week, and the headline read "Digital Restaurant Sales Surge." And for a quick second, Nick, I thought I was going to read an article about how you could buy fake food and give a fake tip with real money and be fake full. And I was glad to note that it was just an article about how online restaurant sales are surging, which is, of course, great for all business. And, I have a soft spot for small business because of how affected small business tends to be during pandemics or downturns. And in an era where we don't have price discovery, for anything that's publicly traded because the Fed or the central bankers will come in and bail you out. It's it makes my heart smile to know that those online restaurant sales are booming. But yeah, it's such a crazy, bizarro world right now that for a quick second, I swore it was going to be like the fake ponies or the fake horses. Remember about a year or so ago, you put me on to what was it? You could buy crypto ponies or something. I don't even remember what it was anymore.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, they were ponies on the blockchain, and you could bet on the races, and you could own one of the horses, and you could buy them fancy horseshoes and saddles and things like that. On the blockchain with cryptocurrencies, and so it continues to evolve for sure. And the value of cryptos in general, which we haven't specifically mentioned as we talk about these NFTs, continues to go up with Bitcoin at hitting $57,000 this week.
And look, the bottom line is for the same reason that I believe the markets globally, for the most part, will continue to reach all-time highs. It's simple supply and demand. I mean, the bottom line is, we had the ECB earlier this week come out and say, well, we're not making big changes right now, but we have another big bazooka just in case, because it realizes that sooner or later, the central bankers are going to lose control of the bond market. I've said this, I think, since 2016. That process takes a while to play out and develop, but you're seeing more cracks and you're seeing less control, and they're going to have to do more. And the more they do, and I'm talking about the central bankers now, the more vulnerable the system becomes. And eventually it breaks, because history will show you fiat currencies, systems and structures, they all go through turnings, right? It's been a bit since we talked about the fourth turning on this podcast. And, that tends to be US specific, but it's very global in where you can apply it. And I think that's what's happening right now. And it's why I think that we're going to see continued highs in the overall indices around the world.
Well, people have more money to invest in stocks, and the fourth turning you talk about, the deinstitutionalization. You see reports coming out now about how many new businesses were created last year in the pandemic. People moving away from the traditional institution of employment, creating new wealth for themselves, redefining what it means to have the 9 to 5, et cetera. And you and I are part of that to some extent, and that translates over into the stock market with more people watching it, more people day trading, more money in the system, and more people openly talking about it. With I think it was a Deutsche Bank survey saying that some people plan to put as much as half their stimulus checks into the stock market, and so more people interested in it. And you talk about, or you think about the wall of worry, or who's the next greater fool, or if you're going to run out of buyers. But if you can print money and send it to people who can then buy stocks with it, it's gets sort of to be a clusterfuck in your mind, thinking about an end game. And that's why we come back to some sort of great reset, or some sort of Bretton Woods system that you can't envision before it happens, right? Because it has to be accommodated at the time in the context of the market and what's happening with the debts, et cetera, and sort of difficult to foresee, right? But you can see some of it with the inflation of certain asset groups like we've been talking about, right? That are away from traditional means and modes of investment, whether that's for individuals or for retirements, as you look at dollars and bonds, right?
Agreed. That's not the only thing stocks that people are using their stimmy checks for, Nick, if you're not aware. Have you heard of OnlyFans?
Have I heard of OnlyFans?
Are you a fan of OnlyFans?
I'm not a fan of anyone on there in particular, though. Its onset has been incredible to watch, and the amount of people that
incredible
are on there,
to watch.
the amount of tangential stories. I saw a lady whose kids got kicked out of private school because she had an OnlyFans channel on there. They were like, it's against the code of conduct, which I know well about in private school. And so anyway, yes, I know about OnlyFans.
So for those of you out there not hip to the OnlyFans is a platform where you can, post any content you want. You could be a gym instructor, or you could be a boxing instructor, or you could be a coach of some kind, a financial advisor. You can post whatever you want. You set up an account, and the market dictates what you are worth, what your content is worth. And of course, because we are a society of needs and wants, it's no coincidence that the ladies in particular have been getting a disproportionate amount of attention and dollars and euros and yen on the OnlyFans platform. And so I was aware of it, but
probably Dogecoin,
and probably Dogecoin and maybe an NFT or two, right? And so I bring it up because I hadn't been able to personalize that in a way that it was with someone close to someone that I'm close to. And so I finally heard a story this week where a friend of ours has a friend who has an OnlyFans account. And so she's brilliant. I haven't seen her account. I don't know what this girl looks like. I'm sure she's beautiful. But anyhow, what struck me was she's making approximately $20,000 a month net on OnlyFans. She does it on the side. She's able to dictate what demographic is able to see her content. So the way she gets around her family or friends or anyone that, she doesn't want to see her in this light, and I don't know what that light is, but I'm sure it's bright, she just mutes certain regions or opens up certain regions. And so she decided she was going to open up Asia, and she only creates content that can be seen in Asia. And so, she's traveling, she's getting cute outfits, she's getting toys, the whole thing, and being able to write off all of it while bringing in 20 G's a month. Not bad work.
What were you talking about last week, Gerardo? The Patreon? I told you I was going to get a Patreon and stimulate my own pain. I told you now I'm going on OnlyFans.
I'm going to leave it there before I get myself in trouble. But cheers to the OnlyFans content creators out there. Your creativity is appreciated. The world needs more of it. And good for you for being able to monetize it. Let's talk gold. Let's pivot to gold. Gold had an interesting week. It had an interesting day. It actually was down as low as $16.98 earlier in the day. It closed at $17.25. And what was interesting to me is that it did so with the dollar up 0.22% and then the 10-year up a bit as well. And so, when we look for correlations and we look for the way one thing trades against the other thing and one asset class versus the other asset class. We've talked at length, I think, on this podcast about the correlation between real rates and the dollar and gold. Today was interesting, and I'm really curious to see if next week it's followed up with a move higher. Having the dollar higher, having rates higher, and having gold bounce back was encouraging to me. We'll see, right? I don't think we're as Mr. McCullough would say, in a new quad yet, but I think it's clearly starting to show signs of a change in trend and direction. And that may take months to play out, folks. But again, hell of a buying opportunity if you're somewhat patient, right?
I was thinking about NFTing some OnlyFans accounts. I was not thinking too much about gold while you were doing that. Sorry. No, it was
The first
it's
5,000 days.
it's a transitory week. It was a bit confusing, as you say, because the typical correlations that we've been seeing started to break down a little bit, and this comes after a bit of a rocky road last week in the markets that we talked about, and we talked about it not being the end of the world, right? Because we were watching the VIX, and the VIX hadn't spiked up. But you did get into true correction territory with the NASDAQ, albeit briefly. I mean, and we've also talked about, or at least I've definitely written about, how things are happening faster now, right? So like a correction that takes, typically weeks to play out, you just saw play out in a matter of a couple of trading days. But more importantly, what I was writing about is you got that little chink in the armor now, right? So it's not just straight up like it has been. You've had that a little bit of pullback, a lower high. And then it is confusing because the rates have, frankly, completely turned around to start the year. If you look at a year-to-date chart of yields, I'm talking about, it's going straight up. But if you pull it back out to like 6 months or a year, you can see that the trend for rates is still down. So like you say, it's going to be interesting to see if this is going to be a reversal of what we've been seeing, or if it's going to be more of the same old, where we see the dollar start to back off a bit and rates start to come back down, right? That's obviously what we're watching, and it's a bit uncertain, frankly. So, I was taking a bit of profits this week, which I was writing about. I have an issue actually to send out this afternoon where we're going to explain why I took some profits on the energy sector earlier this week, for example, and how we're just sitting on a bit of cash because I'm interested to see exactly what you say, if this is the turn of a cycle or if this is just a short-term blip.
I tell you who wasn't waiting. Newmont wasn't waiting. And, we said a couple of weeks ago, I wrote an article, you've written several, about how we expect these depressed equity prices in the gold space to be taken advantage of by cash-rich producers, right? And sure enough, Newmont decided to expand its footprint in BC's Golden Triangle with a $393 million purchase, that's in Canadian dollars, of GT Gold. It was done at a substantial premium. And again, I think this is just the absolute start of what's going to be an M&A cycle that leads to a drastic re-rating of the better companies. Companies like Revival Gold and the Midas Golds and the Magna Golds that are either in production, have a short timeline to production, or have a short timeline to a permit on a world-class asset. In this case, Perpetua. I'm going to keep calling it Midas Gold, but in this case, Perpetua, right? Which is due to receive its permit here in the next quarter or two. Thoughts on that, Nick? I mean, the premium was pretty robust, a 38% premium to the 20-day volume weighted average price of GT Gold shares. Good deal for shareholders. Keep the upside. In a bull cycle, when things turn back up, Newmont's likely going higher. And if it wants to continue to produce at its levels, it's going to have to go out and make more acquisitions, as are the other companies.
I don't have a lot of thoughts. I wasn't a close follower of GT, but good for the sector, obviously. Something that was anticipated, the consolidation, obviously. What I would note is that there was like a short case against GT from Muddy Waters that had been going on. And so, this flies in the face of that. Newmont came in and took out the asset. And so there obviously wasn't much to that. But no, good for the sector. I expect you'll see more of it. I expect you'll see ripple effects of stocks doing okay in and around the area where GT was operating. And no, I think it's I won't call it a kickoff because there have been takeouts here and there along the way, right? Like TGZ is no longer a ticker, I realized this week on one of my lists. And so, yeah, I mean, it's good to see.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the city of Minneapolis, which has reached a $27 million settlement with George Floyd's family weeks before the trial is scheduled to begin for the officer charged with murder in Mr. Floyd's death. That, like the $1.9 trillion stimulus package and the help that the government is giving us, allegedly, should be reworded, because in both instances, it's the taxpayer that is footing the bill. And look, you could support the stimulus, you could be against it, you could like Mr. Biden, you could be against Mr. Biden. Whatever your cup of tea is, that's great. Enjoy your cup of tea. But the fact is that when it comes to cities paying out settlements, in this case, a $27 million settlement, be absolutely clear, everybody, that in the case of the city of Minneapolis and in the case of this $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, it's coming from us, the taxpayer, because that's the way it's set up. The police unions' budgets don't get hit when they have to settle out of court in civil court. That comes out of the city budget, right? The state, the city budget. And so, that has to change. The influence of police unions in this country has to change, or there isn't going to be an incentive for police officers that don't have the right moral compass to not shoot or to not kneel on somebody for 8 to 9 minutes when the guy's surrounded by 5 or 6 other officers and is begging for you to get off his neck. Obviously, he's been arrested and indicted. We just had an officer here in Austin, Texas that was indicted for murder, the murder of Michael Ramos a couple of years ago. And so it'll be interesting to see where that case goes. But again, regardless of whether they're found guilty or not, the settlements are coming from taxpayer dollars. And frankly, as a taxpayer and one that, pays quite a bit in taxes, it pisses me off.
100%. And, I know that this doesn't come with, an admission of guilt, and this isn't a trial, but like all the other awards in all the other cities, in all the other cases where cops have killed people, it has to be taken, even going back to like the civil case with OJ, right? Like the evidence, the video, the eyewitness lends itself such that the city council viewed it that they should award this settlement, $27 million, to the Floyd's family. And we see this over and over and over again, independent of what the outcome is going to be in criminal court, and too often different from what the outcome is in criminal court, right? And we'll talk about the sort of two systems of justice and how you can, pay your fine and move on, whether that's for murder if you're a police officer, in which case you get the taxpayers, as you said, to pay your fine, or we could look at the multitude of quasi-criminal or outright criminal banking acts that have been called snafus, etc., where banks get to pay a fine, in that case from out of shareholders and stakeholders' pockets, right, as opposed to taxpayers. And it's a way to avoid responsibility and a way to avoid accountability, and in a way to avoid an explicit admission of guilt. And we see it all too often, and it's how the system colludes with itself, the different and various institutions, from policing to state's attorneys, which I'm about to launch on in a second, to other state and federal institutions. And so I want to talk about this case in South Dakota. I might have brought it up before, but I've been following it for a couple of months. Have you seen the South Dakota state's attorney that ran over somebody with his car and said that it was a deer? Have you seen anything about that?
Not recently, but this is, if I'm not mistaken, this case is it's over a year old, right? If I'm thinking of the same case. It's
not quite a year. It was this crash was in September.
That makes sense. Okay.
And the news was the guy was found dead on the side of the road in South Dakota. It was the South Dakota Attorney General who hit the deceased gentleman. The deceased gentleman, the state's attorney is Jason Ravensborg. And so the dead person is Joseph Bover, who was found on the side of the road. And so you can imagine an attorney. At the time, I said, I'm pretty sure I talked about it on this podcast, that it sounded like the state's attorney was inebriated. He was coming from a late night function. He didn't report the incident right away, which you think you would have done. He went back to his house. It sounded like he got his stories together. It sounds like he called a good old boy sheriff or a pal in the police department. Made his statement and tried to put it to bed quietly, except it hasn't gone down also quietly. The South Dakota Congress has tried to bring actions against this guy. And then, and this is what got me back on it here in the past 2 weeks, we got some interviews from when he was given his statement after the crash. And only now we learned that the gentleman's glasses were found on the front seat of his car. And so... which means, and the police say this in the recorded interview, the gentleman's face had to come through the windshield. And so there's no way if a person's face comes through your windshield that you think you hit a deer. And anyway, I'm taking too much time on this story, but Minneapolis is paying a fine or paying a settlement to try to move past this, and we'll see what happens in the criminal court. So too was a state's attorney general trying to, circumvent accountability by using the system, which, by the way, he's in charge of in the state, no doubt, and that's why this turning is like anti-institutions, right? Anti-establishment and anti-entrenched. With state's attorneys like Jason Ravensborg, quite frankly. And that's about the end of my rant, but I don't think this guy is going to get away with it. Thank goodness. He clearly knew he hit this guy, just like everyone that was watching George Floyd knew that the knee in the neck was the cause of his death, right?
Yeah, not everybody. You still got people that, he might have done some drugs the night before, had some in his system. And, it was that heart irregularity that he had that really did it. Nothing to do with the big cop putting his knee on the back of his neck and blocking his airway for 8 minutes. But anyhow, you can, it is, those people are what those people are. They have their own reasons. They're entitled to believe, I guess, whatever they want to believe. And speaking of believing or not believing, we talked about Andrew Cuomo last week, and I said he was doing a really good job of positioning himself for asshole politician of the week. And man, he's 2 weeks strong, right? Just this week, more allegations from more new alleged victims that he has sexually harassed them. I think last I checked, I may have lost count, but I think he's up to 6 allegations now. And, today after some investigation, and obviously she's privy to some information that we're not, but AOC, who does a really great job of upsetting both the right and the left, equally almost, especially the older guard on the left. She said, after reviewing the information, he absolutely should resign. And so Mr. Cuomo has denied every allegation other than possibly saying a couple of inappropriate things and making a couple of inappropriate jokes. He's flat out denied putting his hands on any of these women. Some of the allegations are pretty nasty, locked doors, hand up shirts, things of that nature. So yeah, let's see where that goes. It's been an interesting week, as it always is when it comes to U.S. politics. Let's see where that goes. Something to watch. Did you hear about Governor Pete Ricketts, which unfortunately is related to Tom Ricketts of, Chicago Cubs fame? Everybody that knows me knows I'm a big Chicago Cubs fan. But the Ricketts, some of them lean left, some of them lean right. They often don't agree on things. And Governor Pete Ricketts, did you hear his comment on marijuana this week?
I didn't. I want to hear it, and then I have comments on Cuomo, but let me hear about the cannabis.
It's a quick one. He said if in response to the legalization of marijuana on a federal level, he said, if you legalize marijuana, you're going to kill your kids.
Oh, that's not what I was expecting.
At least he didn't beat around the bush.
We're doing like Reefer Madness in 2021. That's what we're doing.
That's exactly what I thought. Like, what century are you from? Like, what decade are you from? Shit seemed crazy in the 40s and 50s when they were using it to scare everybody and tell them that Mexicans were horrible and were going to rape their woman. And nah, it was just weed helps you relax and have a good time. And yeah, maybe some of the women like relax and have a good time, and some of the guys do too, and things happen. But good gracious, you're going to kill your kids is a ramp up of that one.
To be fair, Trump was still saying that about Mexicans a couple of years ago too.
Oh, Trump, look no further than our own Governor Abbott, who took, I mentioned a week or two ago that I agreed with him reopening and giving businesses and citizens the right to choose whether they want to wear a mask or not, which you still can do, but it shouldn't be mandated. I don't believe that you absolutely have to. I do believe that every business has the right to mandate that if you're going to be in their establishment, you either do have to wear that mask or you don't. Let them decide. But yeah, right after that, he immediately pivoted to, I'm opening up Texas. It's going to be open. Freedom, right? But, and then his next comment was, I am worried a little bit that, all these undocumented immigrants are going to bring in the COVID. So again, it's just like, pick on Central Americans and pick on my people, the Mexicans, and, make it to where you set up the straw man argument so that if cases do spike or go up and hospitalizations do spike and go up in the next month or two, you already have the thing that caters to the nasty part of your base, which is blame the immigrants and blame the minorities and blame the people that don't have the lobbyists. And on that front, to Mr. Governor Abbott, you get my Mr. Cruz salute, a nice big fuck you.
I like how you can go back and forth to saluting him one week to fuck you the next. That's how it should be. You don't have to be like all on one side or the other. And for Cuomo, I was talking to my wife about this, right? And I don't really have a dog in that fight other than consistency,
thank God.
Right? Other than consistency, right? I just want to know which women we're trusting and which women we're not, and who has to resign and who doesn't. I want I want that to be like in a diagram or in a table, right? Because it seems to me, if he wasn't a Democrat from New York, he would have been long gone, right? Like if he was an executive or if he was a conservative or anyway, it just seems like there's a bit of a double standard. We talk about the two-tier justice system. I just ragged on a Republican state's attorney general from South Dakota, but the same thing to the Democrat, right? It seems like if this were someone else, the Democrats would be seizing on it. And good for AOC for, holding fire both ways. But yeah, I was asking my wife, like, which women do we have to believe? And she really didn't have an answer too. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. But yeah, as the cases seem to mount, it's like, really? They're going to let this guy get away with that?
Yeah, and which side of kind of the argument I always stand for. I just want the truth and accountability, the bottom line. If he didn't do anything and these women are lying, there should be repercussions. But, I am very inclined to initially believe any accusation and always want a thorough investigation, that hopefully is nonpartisan and non-political, though in this country, that's almost impossible to achieve. So I hope that the commission that's investigating this is able to put politics aside and look, if he's guilty of just one allegation, get his ass out of there and go prosecute him and put him where he needs to be. It seems simple, right?
Well, we'll see. There has been some people calling for his resignation, I think it was like the head of the New York State's assembly, I believe was a Democrat, called for him to resign. And he's like, hell no, man, I'm not resigning. So we'll see. It's interesting to watch for sure. Agreed.
We continue to have National Guard troops at our Capitol because there have been new reports that the intelligence community shared that a militia group planned another attack as recently as March the 4th. And they, I guess they're substantial enough to continue to want to have 5,000 National Guard troops at the Capitol. And so for anyone that thinks, and you and I talked about this, Nick, about the fourth turning and, the top and how, we don't anticipate peace and stability to return, for possibly another 8 to 10 years, right? We could be mid-cycle, not full cycle. And so, at the very least, I would encourage everybody to, just stay vigilant, stay careful, exercise the rights that the country allows for you and that you have depending on your state and city. And just be cautious out there. We're definitely due for some more volatility. I don't think that's the last that we'll hear of the people that believe that the Pences and Pelosi's should be hanged. I don't think they're just done because they haven't reinstated Donald Trump as president yet. I'm sure there's a new story out there about he's coming back and he's just playing four-dimensional chess, right?
I was reading a story the other week, and this will tie some things together. I'm not sure how relevant it is in general, but you remember like when obviously the protests were going on this past summer, the Black Lives Matter protest, and there was a couple instances of this, but one in Virginia I was reading about this week where police stopped for a moment and had some lighthearted moments with protesters. This one I'm referring to in Virginia was police officers stopped for a moment to dance with some Black Lives Matters protesters. I don't know if you recall that individual event, but it happened and there was video of it. So, and then those same officers who stopped for a moment to hold the Black Lives Matter sign and dance with the Black Lives Matters protesters were involved in the insurrection in the Capitol in early January, and they were on camera. And people from the local Black Lives Matters group confronted these officers on Facebook, and there was some big logic hurdles that were jumped over for these officers to say, I can support your cause and still believe in my cause, which I'm not sure you can believe in two things at the same time, but
not those two.
Right.
You can some things, but not those two.
And these people, and this is recent, this story was just in like the past week, and these officers, who by the way are police officers, right?
Yes.
Were still standing by their position. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that cohort has gone away. I think that cohort is a little bit misguided. And we've talked about the Gadsden flags and the thin blue line, right? How they're mixing up the don't tread on me with the support of the police, who often are doing much treading. And so you still see Trump saying that he's going to run in 2021 and releasing statements. And so anyway, all that to say that I agree with you that the turbulence and the turning isn't over yet, and Biden isn't it, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. I think it's going to be a lot. And
for everybody abroad that's keeping track or not keeping track, let's provide some context. There are over 400 people under investigation by the FBI. The FBI has arrested more than 250 people, amongst them several police officers. I believe that last total was up to 35 or 40 that were on administrative leave while pending investigation. Several former military members. And so, there's an investigation about whether or not Republican lawmakers were helping coordinate with some of these insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol and apparently had been on a guided tour the day before that we've talked about several times on this podcast. So look, there's just like the George Floyd trial that I think everybody should keep an eye on in the next couple of weeks. And that verdict, that has the potential to reignite flames here in this country. So will the trials of a lot of these insurrectionists. It should be interesting to watch, to say the least. But just keep an eye out, watch out for your neighbors, and be good to each other, people, no matter what crazy shit you believe.
No doubt.
What are we watching with stocks, Nick? Copper had a solid week, closed at 414. It dipped below 4 briefly this week, bounced back really, really well. Any thoughts on copper?
I told you that was going to happen last week. I think
you did.
I told you copper was fine. No, I'm interested to see what happens with what we were talking about earlier, the broader indices, the the rates. And I know you're watching some exploration plays if you're talking about specific things that you might want to talk about. But for me, no, I'm interested to see if this is the start of something bigger that we need to sort of reposition for, or if the trends that have been in place are going to continue.
I tell you who had a really great week. Hannon had a great week, finding more silver, finding more copper. And anybody that claimed to be an expert in Peru and said that, stay away from Michael Hudson, I got news for you. You were wrong. And so that is what it is. I've been wrong many a times, but at the very least, I'll admit it. So look, copper hit a 52-week high of 61 cents Canadian this week. It closed down a bit at 51 cents, but still trading very, very, very well on solid volumes. A lot to look forward to there. Perpetua, we talked earlier, was up as much as 40% today on Friday. It closed up 20%. It's been pulling back for the last several months. It was good to see it pick up some steam in a soft gold market. And if I got to give you two tickers that I'm looking forward to this week, I anticipate finally that we'll get assay results from Kinsley Mountain that directly affects Nevada Sunrise Gold, which I am a shareholder of, and New Placer Dome Gold. Same. And so I'm biased with both companies. I like Kinsley Mountain. New Placer Dome Gold owns 80% of it. At its height, it commanded a market cap of $250 million. Currently, New Placer Dome Gold's 80% interest is valued at $19 million. And by the way, they have another property in Bolo that appears to have the potential for 1 million ounces, potentially economic, shallow oxide gold in Nevada. So, opportunities in both of those. I don't think that even with solid results, we get, a tripling or quadrupling of the stock right away. But I do believe if we hit some of the sulfides, that deeper 9, 10, 11 gram per ton stuff over decent widths in new areas, and we find extensions of the old pits, the oxide gold, that's setting up really well because there's still going to be lots of holes in the labs. I believe they drilled 49. I believe they had announced 9. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sally, the CEO of New Placer Dome Gold, had indicated he planned on releasing 18 holes as early as this coming week, which of course leaves, quite a bit, 22 more pending. So yeah, no, I long-term follower of that asset. I think there's a lot to find there. We'll see.
I too am looking forward to those results, as you know, and I found something to talk about while you were talking about coming drill results, because I forgot about the dumb guy in Illinois about what he said about the cannabis, and I wanted to come back to that. So I'll talk about cannabis stocks. You should buy them. And I was talking about one that was not quite a cannabis stock, but that's a biotech stock, Cardiol, a couple of weeks ago. I think it was around $4. It went up to almost $5 and it's pulled back a little bit, but on the highest volume it's had in the past year, just like yesterday. And so they're expecting results for their phase 1 Health Canada study that was basically going to see if it was safe to administer a pure CBD to people, a pharmaceutical grade, the CBD. And as long as it's safe, then they could move on to a couple of things. They have, and I mentioned this before, phase 2 international trials for acute myocarditis. And then in the US, they're testing COVID patients with previous cardiovascular disease to see if CBD can help their heart. So anyway, the phase 1 results were expected in Q1, and it's getting to the end of that, and the stock is going up on high volume. And I don't know. I would draw some conclusions there, maybe loose lips or something. But anyway, Cardio is one to take a look at, and those results would be something I'm anticipating.
Interesting. To be fair, the owner of the Cubs is based out of Illinois. Pete Ricketts, the gentleman that said your kids will die if you legalize marijuana. No, you're going to kill your kids if you legalize marijuana. He is based out of Nebraska. He is the Nebraska governor. So if you are in Nebraska, Mr. Hodge, and you choose to partake in some of nature's finest flower, please be careful.
You mean it's not corn?
I just don't want you to die, man. You know what? I that's all I got for this week. I was going to talk about the Microsoft hacks, and there's been a lot of activity, as there always is, some publicized, some not. The most recent hacks on Microsoft's system was something I was going to touch on. Let's leave that for next week because I think that situation is going to continue developing. I noticed Google and Microsoft are kind of going back and forth. I'd like to see where that ends up before I opine on it, but it's something to look at. Outside of that, I really don't have anything else to say. I will say if the Kinsley Mountain results are good, I do plan a site visit in April. I'm looking forward to that. And that's it. Anything else on your end of it, Nick?
No, I think that's a good podcast. We normally don't run out of things to say, but I'm content to leave it there and follow up on the hacks next week.
I like it. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 108 of Bizarro World. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Jackhammer noises. See ya.